Now, Mr. President, I'd like also for the record today to make a couple of comments regarding where we are right now. This is August 16th, 2018. Normally, this body, by tradition, at least in the last 50 years or so, would be back in the state in a state work week. But I'd like to give the majority leader, Senator Mitch McConnell from Kentucky, full credit for deciding to keep us here this week and the next couple weeks in August, which would normally be back in the, where senators would normally be back in the state. This was never, Mr. President, when we brought this up as a suggestion, was never about staying here in August. It was only about two things. It was about trying to use every day that we could to get as many nominees confirmed as we could before the end of the year. Now, why is that important? Today, because of the obstructionism of the minority party, Mr. President, we have over 300. The actual number of the last count was 331 nominees waiting to be confirmed. By some estimates, this president will not be able to form his government for 10 years. Now, last time I checked, even if he gets reelected, he won't be here 10 years, Mr. President. So I think this is one of the big reasons why we wanted to stay here and do all we could to get as many nominees done in this month as we could. The second and equally important purpose of staying here and using as many days as we could, Mr. President, was to fund the government by the end of the fiscal year, something that this body has only done 4 times in 44 years, since the 1974 Budget Act was put into law. Let me say that again. Only 4 times has the Senate and the House actually fully funded the federal government on time in the last 44 years. We're supposed to pass 12 appropriation bills to do that. The average over those 44 years, Mr. President, is only 2.5. This is an unmitigated disaster that has led directly to this $21 trillion debt crisis that we have today. As a matter of fact, as I stand here today, there are only 12 working days. The way the Senate works, we only have 12 working days between now and the end of the fiscal year. Now, to the credit of leadership and people on both sides of the aisle, we in a bipartisan way have already passed 7 appropriation bills this year. So we're already 3 times better than the average of any other Congress in the last 44 years. Unfortunately, we still have 5 to go, and those 5 are predominantly most of the money that will be spent on the discretionary side, which is only $1.3 trillion of the $4.3 trillion that the government ultimately will spend, and that's another conversation for another day. But we only have 12 working days to do 5 bills, which total almost $1 trillion. Now, Mr. President, getting close is not good enough. In the real world, if you don't get the whole job done, you don't get to compete. And when you don't compete, you don't survive. In my view, we have several opportunities. Right now, we know 12 working days the way the Senate normally works. But if we work and vote on Mondays and Fridays, we pick up another 15 days, Mr. President. That's 27 days. Now we have a little better fighting chance. But my rule is this. We either get all of them funded or we fail. And that means that we've got 12 working days the way we normally operate to fund 5 more appropriation bills. Mr. President, we're called here primarily in this body. The first calling of the 6 reasons is to fund the federal government. I'm absolutely committed to that. I know most people in here are. But right now, we've got to be dead serious about what the goal is. And the goal is funding the entire government of the United States. Mr. President, to do that, we've got to pass 5 more bills in the next 12 days. I'm going to end here, but I want to call out one other thing, and that is that this is not just this year. I want to thank the leadership, both Democrat and Republican, in the House and the Senate, for forming the Joint Select Committee that's underway right now. I personally have the privilege to be a member of that committee who is charged, there are 16 members, 8 from the Senate, 8 from the House, 8 Democrats, 8 Republicans, 2 co-chair people, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican. And our charge is to come up with a new way, a different way to fund the federal government every year. And I will tell you right now that we're making progress. This is a tough hill to climb, but we have the right people doing it, I believe, the right leadership, and I want to thank leadership for allowing us to have that opportunity to make that effort. By November 30th, we're charged to bring back a proposal that will change the way we fund the federal government going forward. And that's the final comment, is that this can't be a one-off year. where we actually get the majority of these bills done. We have to get them all done by September 30th, but we also have to put in place, Mr. President, a way to do this every year, like breathing, like everybody else in the real world does. Mr. President, it's an honor and a privilege to be in the United States Senate, but it's an even bigger honor when we get our job done. Thank you. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.